Good evening, everybody. My name is John Horn. I'm the host of The Frame on KPCC. Thank you. Before we start a panel, a couple quick announcements to keep in accordance with the Academy rules. Please don't take photographs or videos during the panel discussion. And I also would like to recognize that this downstage event is supported in part by the California Arts Council. If you want more information, please go to arts.ca.gov. Let's get going with our panel. Let's bring up producer Peter Burrell. Actor Alma Martinez. A better looking actor than Tony Plana, Rose Portillo. Actor Edward James Olmos. And writer-director Luis Valdez. Let's do this. Why don't you sit here, Luis? I'm very curious, how many people came out here to see I Am Joaquin? Show of hands. There you go. I mean, I think there is a direct line that we need to address between El Teatro Campesino and I Am Joaquin and Zoot Suit. So, Luis, tell us about why one begat the other and why that film led us to where we are today.
I Am Joaquin?
Yes.
I Am Joaquin was my first film, literally. It started out as a slideshow with El Teatro Campesino. It started out as a poem, actually, by the great Corky Gonzalez. You know, Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, you may know, one of the icons of the Chicano movement. Long since deceased, a few years now. But we were in Denver in 1967, summer 67. He handed me a mimeograph copy type copy of his poem. Brought it home, read it finally, and I was totally moved. So I called him and asked permission. I said, can we do it live? Can I just recite this live? And he said, sure. And we started doing it with 50 slides to begin with and kept adding slides, and it just kept getting more and more complex. The live, all of the music was originally produced on the stage live by members of the Teatro Campesino, the voices, all of that. I did the narrative, obviously. And eventually, a friend of mine who was a photographer, George Ballas, who's the cinematographer on this, I don't know if you know, do you know his name? Yeah. In 69, he bought a 16mm Bolex camera. And he says, why don't we take your slideshow, turn it into a movie? And I said, great, but there's no money. And he said, don't worry about that. What he did is he hawked one of his cars and for $5,000. And then he set up shop in a kitchen in Fresno, literally. At the kitchen table, he put a frosted old window, kitchen window, with the Bolex camera anchored on one side and then the slide projector on the other. And so we shot by shot. We made a record of the narrative, so we worked with that to begin with, and shot by shot, we composed it over a weekend in Fresno. And then it became the 16mm film. We exhibited it in our show in Fresno in 1970 for the first time, made it in 69, premiered it in 70, and it was like a thunderbolt. It was like a lightning bolt, and people were totally bowled over by it and became one of the staples of the Chicano movement. So a tribute, I think, to Corky's poem, but also to the power of the collaboration, right?
Yes, absolutely. So how do you get from the Central Valley to the Mark Taper Forum? Because that's a big jump, both geographically and professionally.
The link actually was done, we were based in San Juan Bautista in 1971. We're still there. And Peter Brook in 1973 came and brought his whole company from Paris. Distinguished actors from all over the world. They came. There was a group, about 30, that came, again, on their dime. But they worked with us for that summer. In the 3 months that they were in the United States, 2 were in San Juan. We worked off of the floor of our old warehouse. There was a 26-year-old blonde, very attractive blonde, by the name of Helen Mirren. And actually, she tattooed her hand at the end of the summer. It's the movement, it's the Pachuco symbol. And she still has it, you know. She covers it with makeup to play the Queen in England or something. But anyway, we held workshops, and that's when I met Gordon Davidson. He came, and he said, well, if Peter Brook is working with you, it must be something. So he invited the theater to perform in '74 at the Taper, and we did 10 days, 4 days. Phil, do you remember? Phyllis, huh? 10 days, yes, Phil Esparza. Take a bow, Phil. It's one of my producers, longtime producer. Here we go. And so we filmed it, and we connected with Gordon, and then he invited me. The Carpa de los Rascuachis was a piece that one of our standard pieces in the '70s, and from there he invited me back in '77 to begin a new thing that he wanted to do with New Theater for Now, stories about Los Angeles.
Right.
And so he invited me to write and direct a new piece. And we both had the same idea, actually. He was very interested in the Zoot Suit riots, and I had been carrying a pamphlet that had been given to me by David Sanchez of the Brown Berets way back in '68. I looked at it in '68, was very moved. Guy Endor's Hollywood pamphlet in defense of the Sleepy Lagoon, trying to raise money. And I said, this is powerful stuff. But it was 1968. Martin Luther King had just been assassinated. Bobby Kennedy, we worked on his campaign that summer, had just subsequently assassinated. It was not a time for me to sit down and write a play. It took 9 years, 10 years actually, to get to the point where Zoot Suit premiered at the Taper.
Wow.
Once it was the Taper, then the possibility of going to Broadway and making a movie was possible.
Edward, I want to ask you about where you were in your career. And before I came up here, I looked to see where you were in your career before this play opened. You had a movie called Bogart in 1974, Junkie in Bathroom. You had a movie in 1975, Aloha, Bobby Rose, Chicano #1. And then a movie in 1977 called Alambrista, First Drunk. So when you see this work by this man come on your desk, it's got to be an amazing feeling to see what Luis has offered you.
It was amazing, to be honest with you. I'd never seen anything like it. The opening monologue, Que le guacha mis trapos, and all that, that was the very first thing I ever saw. He only, when we went to audition, it was a cattle call. And I'll never forget, I was actually at the Mark Taper auditioning for the American Messenger Service, which was a play that they were going to do 6 days with book in hand. And I lost the role to Rudy Ramos. And as I was walking out the door, I stopped to look at one of the boards that was there. Yeah. And right at the hall, and the voice hollers from one of the rooms, "Hey, you." Turn around and look, and they go, "Yeah, you. You look like you." It's exactly, I still, to the T, verbatim. "Hey, you. Yeah, you look. You want to be in a play?" I walked to the door and said, "Oh yeah. Oh, then you come tomorrow, 1 o'clock." I said, "Okay." So I came at 1 o'clock. I parked my truck. I had furniture in it. I was delivering furniture all over the city. That's how I used to stay alive. And there was 300 guys there. It was a cattle call. And Milt Hammer gave me a piece of paper. Everybody was holding this little piece of paper, all the guys. There was nothing but guys there at that moment. And they gave me a piece of paper, and I started to read it. And I said, "Oh, my God." I was in shock because I had heard this language when I was growing up on the streets. It was called calo, but it was Pachuco slang. It was just the stuff that the kids on the street that were really badass kids talked. And it was a language that, like everyone later found out, it was meant so that no one could understand it. Not the Spanish-speaking, not the English-speaking, nobody. And they would talk their own thing, and they had their own thing. And I was sitting there going, "Que le guacha a mis trapos." The shit, what the heck does that mean? Guacha, because, WHATCHA, Wacha. It was written out phonetically. It was beautiful. I'd never seen it written, nor had I ever heard myself ever say it. And I was saying, Wacha mi takuche. I had no idea what that was, takuche. And so I read it, and then it got past the calon, and it said, in parentheses, it said, the actor. At the top, it was the pachuco. Then halfway down, it just in parentheses says the actor. And he said, ladies and gentlemen, the play you're about to see is a construct of fact and fact. I said, what the hell is this? I said, I had no concept. I'd never seen anything like it. And so I walked in, and there was Phil and Esparza, and there was Danny, and Milt. No, Milt was outside. There was about 4 other people in the room, but Luis wasn't there this day.
I'd gone back up north.
Yeah.
We couldn't find the pachuco.
So I ended up walking in, and I read it out loud, and just read it. Literally, you couldn't do anything else. To do it correctly, you just had to read it, because nobody could perform it. It was just beyond anything. It was just get through it. That was the key. If you could get through it, you were back. I'm not kidding you. And so I got through it. I said it, and it came out really kind of intensely understood by, just because I was so. At that moment, I had done theater for.
Okay, you're being kind to yourself. Because the reality is that it was a familiar language. It was a sound that was familiar to all. There was a musicality to it, and you tapped into what you hadn't seen written, but
Ever.
you heard it come out of your mouth, and you knew what to do.
Yeah, well, I mean, the tone, there was a rhythm, and I knew the rhythm. I had heard it my whole life. I was born in streets of East LA on the corner of First and Indiana because of my I was born to a wonderful lady who's sitting in the audience, my mother.
Mommy.
Mom, can you sneak up? Mom, can you stand up? She's hard for her to hear. She's 91 years young. But needless to say, I said it, and then I went home. But when I walked out the door, listen to this.
And you came back.
No, yeah, literally. But as I was walking out the door, I did something, and I'm so grateful that I did it. I folded the piece of paper as I was going towards the door, because it was a huge room in the A studio at the Mark Taper. So I went back, and as I was folding it up, I put it in my pocket, my breast pocket, and as I was walking out the door, Milt says, "Give me the paper." I said, "Oh, I left it I left it on top of the table." He goes, "Oh, okay." And so I left, and I went to my truck, and as I was getting in the truck, I pulled out the paper, and I said, "Man, I'm going to learn this. I want to memorize this, okay? And I'm going to come back, to see who got the role. See how good this person was." Because really, you are perfectly 1,000% correct. The moment I saw that piece of paper, the moment I read it, and I read the other part, I said, "This is one of a kind, and this is it. This is the beginning." And we had waited for a long time. I had been doing theater for 14 years. I started in 1964. This was 1978. Okay, I'd done every off LA theater that there was in LA. And that's far off of Broadway, I got to tell you. I'm not kidding, man. So, I was working at the time, I was working for a year at the LAT, at the LA theater, Ralph Waite's place, Los Angeles Theater Center. I'd been working there for a year. I'd been doing perfume with, Kennedy, Jim Kennedy. And so that's how I got a chance to go to the Mark Taper.
Wow.
And so with that in mind, one day I get a phone call about a month later, and they said, "Can you come back for another audition?" And I said, "Oh, shit." I said, "Yeah, I can." But I started to think, where did I put that paper? what the hell? I didn't remember. I said, oh, shit, where's the paper? I said, oh, my shirt. And I looked at my shirt. I went up to my shirt. I looked inside my shirt, and it was in the pocket. But it had been washed. Que chinga. It was just it was so hard to read, and it was just all shredded and wet, and it had been washed many times. I'd worn it, and so anyway, I got it, and I started that night. I started to read it. So the next day I walk in, and I was in Ultimate Hill. I didn't know that Luis was going to be there. I wore a Levi jacket, long. That's the one I wore for all the rehearsals. Remember that? Well, my hat was Levi, pork pie hat made out of Levi material, and I had a Levi. I don't know where I found this shit. A coat down past my knees. It was a Levi coat. I wore a Levi shirt and Levi pants and black shoes. I swear to you. And I walked into that room, and I never once cracked a smile. I never once said hello to them. I walked in the room, bad as I could be. I mean, forget it, man. I was a pachuco from the street the way I saw them. And I walked in there, and then he goes, Luis was sitting there. He was kind of quiet. Everybody was quiet. They were kind of like, what is this? And so I walked in, and he says, are you ready? And I said, just a minute. First word I ever said. I didn't say, hello, how are you? My name's Ed Olmos and all. Nothing, nada, nothing. I looked at the paper, and I went, and I get it, and I threw it away.
Yeah.
I threw que le voy a echar mis trapos. I went right into it, man. I walked up on this, close to the table, man, and there was Luisa, and I threw it right at you. I just let all of the calor come right at you. Que le voy a echar mis trapos. I went crazy. I just lost it, really theatrical. Very big. It was crazy.
Apparently it worked.
Yes, it
Yeah, it
worked.
did.
Boy, did it ever.
What's interesting, a little footnote there is I wrote the script, and I offered my brother a choice. I said, you can either play Hank or you can play the Pachuco. So we came to L.A. to cast, and I was gone that day because we couldn't find the actor, and I had to go home. But then he called me, Danny called me, and he says, we found El Pachuco. And so I came back, and that's when I met Eddie Olmos. He had the quality, you can see it on the screen. Yep. He had the qualities of the young Toshiro Mifune. Mm-hmm. He had the qualities of Humphrey Bogart. He had the quality of the Pachucos. When you finally put it all together, these are the elements, that you need to do the Pachuco. Not everybody could do the Pachuco. And so it was tremendous. This is one of those fortuitous events in the history of art all over the world occasionally, but the right person at the right time. And the combination of Danny and Eddie was tremendous. It was right up on the screen.
Right. So Alma and Rose, there are a couple things that happen. The play opens at the Mark Taper Forum, and it's a huge hit, and then it goes to Broadway, and it's attracting an audience that you don't typically see back then at the Mark Taper Forum and still don't see today. So to be a part of a production that's not only doing incredibly well, but attracting an audience that feels as if their stories have not been told, those two things must be remarkable to go through at the very same time.
Palpable.
Yeah.
Utterly palpable from the very first audience that came in, and it was like, oh my God, aquí está la gente, y la gente necesita, y aquí estamos. It was unbelievable to feel, and I know Alma was touring with El Teatro with Campesinos stuff, and then we got to trade off. We got to trade off. So I know that you walked into that exact same sentimiento.
Okay, I have to tell you the funny stories, okay? So it got so crazy. I mean, we were selling it. I was at the Aquarius, by the way. They had gone to Broadway, and then I took over Rose's role at the Aquarius, and then did the film. So they warned us, the crowd is rowdy. So rather than having ushers, They were bouncers. And so,
Oh, that
because
shifted when I
yeah,
lived.
yeah. So I remember one night, it was really full, the show, everybody's just with us. And I see walking up the aisle this bouncer with a woman over his shoulder, carrying her out. And I went, oh my goodness, this is not the theater that we're used to. But I think that's the exciting part. I just want to add, we were doing theater for people who've never gone before. Because a lot of you have gone and you make reservations, you call, you get a babysitter, you make
the
reservations
babies
for
came.
dinner.
The babies came.
No, everybody came. And they would show up, without
Maybe the
reservations.
babysitter, yeah.
And this is the thing. They would come all the way to Hollywood. And this is the thing with Latino audiences. We don't just see a play once. This was good. Let's go and bring la tía. Let's bring the abuela. Traemos a toda la vengan. They would come multiple times. But what would happen is, remember, there's a tradition for theater. So they would come, but they didn't know any of the tradition. So I think I remember a story. Wasn't it one, Eddie? Because the stage was like this, where you could literally walk up, and they had that false ending. And that's the way, and what is it? That's the way, this is the story ends. And then he goes, Well, at one night, I don't know if it was a night, because you ended up the performance at the Aquarius. He came and did several of the last performances. Well, this man comes up who's been drinking, and he goes, that's the end of the performance. Oh, man, that is so. He walked up to the stage and gave Eddie a big hug, right? And the last anecdote is this. So every night, remember, we're not used to coming to places like this. We're not. And so I was born in Mexico. I was raised in Pico Rivera, so. And so every night we go out to the parking lot, un basurero, tailgating, get the beers, they were partying in the parking lot every night before they came in and after. So that's just a small example of people who aren't used to going to the theater, but those are the audiences that this play attracted. And because it attracted those people, many people became theater patrons. But in the case of myself and a lot of compañeros, we found our place. As artists, we found our place in the society. I became an academic. I found my place. I am a Chicana 100%. And I think that's what this whole experience, not just for me, but for a lot of people. And I thank the wonderful artists. I thank the wonderful producers. And I thank Luis, who is, para mí, el máximo en cuanto artista, political activist. Anyway, gracias, señor.
Peter, you have the job of taking, thank you. Peter, you have the job of taking what Luis has created on stage and putting it on film, and there's so many different ways you could adapt a story like this, but you chose a very traditional way to try to capture the theatricality of it. So how did the film come about, and what was the mandate, and what did Luis want to make sure was guaranteed in terms of the way in which the story was going to be told?
Well, the film really had its birth when Gordon Davidson convinced the Mucky Mucks at Universal that we've got to record this remarkable play. This is a piece of history. Gordon was being touted as the Joe Papp of Los Angeles and so forth. And so the original plan was to put 3 cameras in the audience and film a play. Well, something very fortuitous happened. Once we got our offices all set up, there were 2 strikes in 1981 and 1982, a writer's strike and an actor's strike. So we were in the offices, and we were all supposed to go home until it was over, and Louis said, oh, I got no place to go. I got no place to go, so let's just hang out here. So in that time, we found Bud Smith, a remarkable editor, had done movies like Putney Swope and Rhinoceros, and he found us Jackie Cambus. Thank God you're here. So glad to see you.
Jackie. Yeah.
A remarkable editor. And Tom John, who was a production designer who had done theater and movies, and David Myers, who was a traditional cameraman, but he also did Woodstock. He did the Porta-John scene in Woodstock, but he also did the Last Waltz. So we started gathering those people because Louis said, I don't want to just film the play. I want to make this a movie. But he wisely stated that we can't open it up and go out on the streets because we were given about $1.7 million to do the movie, and the mandate was to shoot it in 10 days. So he said, but let's use the interior of the Aquarius. The entire movie was shot inside the Aquarius Theater with the exception of the opening scene when the lowrider vehicles come up and the stock shots of the Sleepy Lagoon. so Luis used the box seats to create the radio station, and the chase scenes were in the audience and the bar, and so forth. So what happened was we had to get more money. We had to get a little more money, and so the other fortuitous event was meeting Verna Fields, who was the head of post-production at Universal, and she really latched on to our idea and became our champion. And so we would go to her, and she would go up to Ned Tannen's office and beg for more money, and we kept begging for more money, and then finally we got to what I presumed was maybe going to be the last trip. And at the same time, Verna was helping us. She was helping Spielberg shoot inserts for Jaws in her pool in her backyard in Encino. So we went to Ned's office. I don't know if you remember, but Ned would sit there and listen to us, and always very kind and
That's
gracious.
Ned Tannen, president
Ned
of
Tannen,
Universal.
exactly. And so in the middle of the conversation, Ned gets up from his desk and starts walking out of the room. I said, hey, he's going to take us down to accounting and give us a boatload of money. But I guess we better follow him. So we did. And we get to the elevator, and he pushes the button, and the doors open up, and you sit there, okay, it's time to ask for more money, or do we get on the elevator and be grateful for what we've got? And there really was no option. You get on the elevator. So a little while later, I went up to Luis, and I said, gee, I'm sorry, Luis, we couldn't get any more money. I guess we're going to have to do this with what we have. And he turned to me with those sympathetic eyes and said, Peter, don't worry. I started theater on the back of a great pictures truck with cardboard cutouts. I know that limitation is part of the creative process. Until somebody sets the edge of my palette, I can't begin to paint.
Wow, very nice.
Yes, you did, because I've quoted it many times.
An interesting footnote is Burma, right?
Right.
Verna Fields, yeah, vice president at Universal at the time. Also one of the editor of Jaws. When in 1965 was teaching at UCLA, and some of her students went to Delano to film some scenes from the grape strike. It had just started. And it so happens that they were there on the very day that I had the first meeting to organize El Teatro Campesino. And so she said, I have some film about you. Would you like a copy? I said, yeah, what is it? And she showed it to me. And I said, that's fantastic. I said, that's the very inception. That's the moment that El Teatro was created in Delano. And so we got the copy, 16 millimeter print of her short film. But she was very, very supportive. Ned Tannen was very supportive. This version was not my original version, I was like everybody else. I had delusions of grandeur, I was going to make a movie. I wanted to make a movie, damn it, So my conception was very much like Batman, before Batman. Before Batman came back. But I had skyscrapers. I had the Pachuco flying on top, and flying through the air. And we took it around, and people would tell me, this is a $20 million movie. You're never going to get it done, unless you get another director. I said, I want to direct it. Nah, forget it, So it came down to the reality of Universal Studios, Ned Tannen. He said, we'll give you $750,000 to film it on videotape. 3-camera shoot, and then we'll blow up the videotape to 35 millimeter film. And they showed me the Gong Show movie. And I said, this is disgraceful, And I said, it's got to be filmed. So it said, fine, we'll do it film. So the 35 millimeter film, we brought on Davey Myers, our cinematographer, great Davey Myers. And he discovered that what the studio had in mind was they were going to bring the old Mitchell cameras out of mothballs because everybody was doing Panavision now. And the Mitchell cameras were 10 years in retirement. But they were going to bring out those old 35 millimeter cameras and let me use 3 of them. And he shamed them. He said, that's disgraceful. So we ended up with 3 Panavision cameras, with 3. And the first night, my baptism by fire, I swear to you, the first night that we shot, again, I was so into it, that all of this was ingrained. I couldn't sleep that first night. But I did finally fall asleep. And what I dreamt was I was in bed with 3 35 millimeter cameras watching me, filming me sleeping. I had to wake up. I said, no, this is just ridiculous. But it was a baptism of fire that was aided by a lot of good friends, Peter Burrell, as a line producer, as the hands-on guy, was absolutely instrumental and basic in terms of turning our very limited resources into what you see on film. We used every frame. Jacqueline can tell you. We were in the bins looking for, here's a lost shot. Because we shot for 13 days. We extended 1 day, 13 days. And that was it. It was my baptism of fire. You can shoot your first film if you want, no stars. There weren't any stars. Maybe Tyne Daly, maybe John Anderson, maybe Charles Edmund. The world did not know Edward James Olmos yet.
Yep.
He was a star after they saw him.
Right.
He was a star in Broadway. You know, he was nominated for a Tony, but not on film. But it was an amazing experience. Bud Smith, supervising editor, was on the set also. And so I'm very grateful to the team that we put together, because it takes collaboration and it takes egoless collaboration to get something like this done. It was a labor of love for a lot of people.
It is. It's impossible to talk about this film and not talk about its modern relevance. And there are lines in the play, in the movie, The Lawyer. I have tried my best to defend what is most precious in our American society, a society now at war against the forces of racial intolerance and totalitarian injustice. When you look at this play and this movie today, I guess the question for all of you, as horrible as it might sound, is it even more relevant today than the era in which it was made?
Yeah, I mean, certainly having the privilege of being able to be part of the revival, it was palpable yet again. And the empowerment that the play was giving to an audience and the release that audience felt, and the shame as well, that here we are again, or still. And that is frightening. And also empowering to be able to do the theater, to give the gift of resistance and resilience that the play holds.
Now, Rose was in the revival in January. Were you going to bring that up?
Playing a slightly older character. Yeah. Yes, I was going to bring that up. You got to see it from both sides.
I did
Wait
too.
for you to bring
I brought it up.
Okay,
She brought it up.
But the fact is, I mean, that it's relevant today. We had a 3-month run, you know, at the Mark Taper Forum. Every performance sold out. To this day, it is the highest grossing production ever produced at the Music Center by the Center Theater Group. And the fact is that there are some members of that new cast that are present. Rose played the mother, played Hank's mother.
I couldn't play Della no more.
And Danny, my brother, played Hank's father. You know?
Papa.
So that was a wonderful comeback. But we also have some of the members of the cast. Are you there? I can see
Stand
Nina.
up.
Stand up.
Matias,
Just stand
stand up. Take a bow.
Just stand up.
Matias Ponce, who
Matias,
played Hank.
Alice, Tiffany,
You know? Tiffany
Bertha.
DuPont, who played Alice.
Melina Bobadilla, Peter
Mendoza.
Mendoza.
Played a number of roles, actually. Okay, so thank you so much. But yes, it's very relevant, dangerously so. But you know, there's more of us now.
Yes.
And
yes.
I mean, it's a fact of life, you know. A friend, Chicano friend of mine said, what he tells Anglos is, we come in peace, but we have you surrounded, you know. And the fact is that in my lifetime, and I have to make this reference, my dad, his memory. My dad was in Cimarron with the first Western that won the Academy, at the first Academy Award, Cimarron.
Yeah.
We're at the Academy. I wish my dad were here because he was just a mule driver. He and my maternal grandfather were mule drivers in the San Joaquin Valley that were hired to drive the mules. It's the Oklahoma Land Rush, right? So they hired anybody that can handle a 16-mule team. And so he was there, and he worked on that for a few days. And he always talked about the catering. He said, we ate real well, you know? and it's a classic film, Richard Dix and some of the others. I mean, but it's an old Western. But as a little kid, he used to tell these stories. And I remember thinking, well, my dad made movies. I can make movies. See, it's that, again, it's that legacy that's passed on. I did not know how difficult it was going to be. But the fact is that the state of California in my time, my lifetime, has changed. In 1940, when I was born, the population was 6 million altogether. There were less than 1 million Chicanos here, 750,000. There were 120,000 Japanese American, 100,000 Chinese, less than 100,000 African Americans. So this was a very white Anglo-Saxon Protestant state. Now we're pushing toward 50 million in 20 years. And the fact is that 40% of those are Latinos. And that's not even counting Asians. That's not even counting all of the varied races of the world that have come to California and to Los Angeles particularly. This is an international global city. And so there's an understanding on the street. There's an understanding in the neighborhoods what this movie is about and what we're really talking about. But there is a recalcitrant, reactive minority that is feeling inferiority complex, an inferiority complex that I know. All those people say white power, white supremacy. That's not white supremacy. That's white inferiority. That's a white inferiority complex. And Trump, our president, has a vicious inferiority complex. I know that because I got well acquainted with inferiority complexes as I was growing up. And you puff yourself up. You try to make yourself bigger than you are. And that's what he's doing. And all those people are so afraid of other people's. And they say, we got to defend our white people. Are crazy because they're overwhelmed. The world is a globe. And we're all connected to each other. And this is why I think that Zoot Suit perhaps will speak to future generations for a little while longer.
I think so. Yes. Edward, my last question is for you. This is Pacific Standard Time, LA, Latin American and Latino art in Los Angeles. This movie obviously meant a lot to you as a professional actor. What do you think this movie means in terms of what it established for Latino cinema and what the future holds for Latino cinema?
It's been a growth process that's getting stronger. It's getting harder. There's more of us now, like it's been said. So, it hasn't changed. We were back 50 years ago, or even 25 years ago. We were maybe what? I don't know. Maybe we're now over 65 million Latinos in this country. They say we're 55, but we're well past that. 25 years ago, we might have been at maybe 30. We were 2% of the images that we saw on the screen. Today, we're over, let's take their number, 55 million, and we're less than 4%.
4%
Latino.
of all roles on film, right?
And film.
Right,
Film.
film
We're
and
talking
television.
about film. It's getting harder, and I think like you know, we come in peace, but we heavy surrounded.
You may borrow that anytime.
I got it.
Can I get off the stage?
I got it. It's part of it. I got it. No, but
It is important, I think, to just look at this film. All of us were naive and young and babies and knew that we were artists and passionate and had no one. We were the first. We were all the first. There was no one to teach us, to guide us, ni modo. We were just a la brava, all of us. Look at the credits. I'm sorry. I'm way at the end in the back. That's insulting. But that's what it took in order for me to do the movie, in order for me to take this shot. That kind of thing, I think, doesn't quite happen now because there are more of us. There are more of us who have mentors, aquí estamos, who go, you don't stand up for that bullshit no more.
There's
Right.
one thing that's really important too, that Luis made it very clear at the outset. There will be no Natalie Woods playing Latinos. Absolutely not.
We could talk all night, but the night is over. So I want to thank you for showing up.
I do want to have one.
Wait,
final-
Luis is going to have the last word. Go ahead, Luis.
The impact of Zoot Suit in Latin America is important. This one opened the gates, the doors of Mexico.
Yep.
It brought walls down for me, believe it or not. And so I was able to go and do the world premiere, thanks to Alma también, with the National Theater Company in Mexico City in 2010. But there had been interest already. A whole new generation of Mexican filmmakers, some of whom are earning. I mean, Alfonso Cuarón and El Chivo, you know, who's gotten 2 Academy Awards already as a cinematographer. 3. Okay. Well, I met these people. I met these guys in Mexico City back in the 80s, and they had all seen Zoot Suit. And so when I started to cast La Bamba years later, in 85, 86, I made a contact with an actor that was a favorite of mine. Emilio El Indio Fernandez. Do you know who he is? Okay, great director, great actor. Also the model for Oscar.
Wow.
That's his body. And so he said he loved the film. He loved, he said something, I got through a different party, he told me, La peluca tiene huevos, is what they said. Your film has balls, is what he said.
Unlike Oscar.
And that's what I like. Yeah. I'm sure it was not El Indio's fault, you know. But anyway, so I said, and I dared to venture to, would you be willing to do a small part in my next film? And he said, oh yes, absolutely. Just send me the script, you know. So in between the time that I was able to get the script to him, he was in an auto accident that finally killed him. He was on a motorcycle, okay? And a guy in his 80s. and so I could no longer talk to him. I had talked to his wife, but he was dying. But I communicated to him that I was still interested. I said, get off the bed and come to LA and I'll put you in the film. But he said, I'll be there. He didn't make it. He died. And just as well, because the part was played by Felipe Cantú, one of the founders of El Teatro Campesino. It doesn't matter, you know. The Snake Man. The Snake Man in La Bamba, the guy with the rattlesnakes. That was the role I was offering him. But for me, it would have been the closing of a huge circle, because as a kid, I used to see Mexican movies that he had directed and starred in and had impacted my life. And I was very proud as a Chicano that I was returning the favor to Mexico.
Yes.
Especially contacting the original Oscar. And now here we are at the Academy, and I know El Indio Fernandez is in heaven, laughing it up and having tequilas, man, with everybody else.
Rose, Edward, Alma, Peter, Luis, thank you all. Thank you guys for coming out.